Zhang Jue, also known as Zhang Jiao, the Great Teacher, General of Heaven, and also that Jesus-looking guy from the Dynasty Warriors games. But what about the Zhang Jue of Fate Grand Order? How well does he compare to his historical and mythical counterpart? And what grade would I give his depiction? Let's find out. So, quick note about this guy's name. Though he is called Zhang Jue in FGO, he can also be known as Zhang Jiao. That's what they call him in the Dynasty Warriors games. His name can be read either way. Since he's called Zhang Jue in FGO, that's what I'll call him. And yes, I'm still bad at tonal languages. Please don't kill me for ruining the pronunciations here. Anyway, let's continue. Zhang Jue is a caster class servant, which suits him quite nicely. He was known as a Taoist sage, able to create potions, charms, and even change the weather. He first made use of these talents to gather followers, and then to launch his uprising against the Han. So as far as class choices go, this one is pretty easy. Getting into his character design, Zhang Jue is depicted as an older man who very much gives off a sage-like appearance. Well, not so much in his first ascension, where he is wearing a suit of all things. Based upon his ascension dialogue, he chose to wear this because he doesn't want people to think he's some old man who can't get with the times. I don't know why that would concern him, but fair enough. His second ascension takes him back to his days as a Taoist sage, where he was the great teacher who helped others and built a religious movement he would later make use of. Finally, his third ascension is him as the General of Heaven, leading the Yellow Turban Rebellion that he is famous for. Honestly, even if his first ascension is more about Zhang Jue fitting in with the times, his design as a whole is good. I don't have anything to complain about here. Moving into his skill set, Zhang Jue's first skill is General of Heaven, which increases quick and arts card effectiveness for all allies for 3 turns. General of Heaven is the title Zhang Jue took when he began his rebellion in 184 CE. His younger brothers Zhang Bao and Zhang Liang received the titles General of Earth and General of the People, respectively. I'll talk about the rebellion itself once we get to his backstory, but for now let's move on. Zhang Jue's second skill is Great Teacher, which increases star gather rate and crit strength for a turn for a single ally, and also removes their debuffs. Like his first skill, Great Teacher is a title that Zhang Jue was given, though this is the one he had before he launched the uprising. He was known as a Taoist sage who could heal the sick and perform miracles, and he would use those talents to build a band of followers that would form the core of his future rebellion. Lastly, Zhang Jue's third skill is Taiping Ji, giving himself an MP charge, but also giving him a chance to change the battlefield for 3 turns to either forest, near water, sunlit, or burning. I would also like to point out that this chance to change the battlefield bit isn't exclusive to one at a time. When I grabbed the footage for this, note that I actually got all 4 of those effects at the same time. Scary. Anyway, the Taiping Ji, or the Essential Art of Great Peace, was the text Zhang Jue received from a Taoist sage. Studying it thoroughly, it is what gave Zhang Jue knowledge of spells that he would make use of both to build a following and later to launch his uprising. In particular, it was said that he knew spells that could change the weather, something he would make extensive use of in battle to help his armies. And that of course leads to...
蒼天すでに死す後天まさに立つべし都市は公私にありて天下大吉ならん
Zhang Jue's noble phantasm is Jiangtian Yisi Huangtian Tang Li, or the azure sky is dead, the yellow sky will rise. Whereupon he holds his arms up to the sky turns yellow, and his army charges at the enemy. This MP increases his MP damage for a turn before damage, the amount depending upon overcharge, and does heavy damage to all enemies. But it also has a host of other special effects, decreasing quick card resistance for all enemies when in a forest, decreasing arts card resistance for all enemies when near water, decreased buster card resistance for all enemies when on a sunlit battlefield, and decreasing crit rate for all enemies when on a burning battlefield. All of these effects last for 3 turns. The MP name immediately gives away what this is about. This is the battle cry of Zhang Jue's uprising, the Yellow Turban Rebellion. So naturally, this MP has him rallying his followers to attack his enemies. As for the various special effects depending upon the battlefield, as I mentioned already, he was said to be able to change the weather with his magic, using that to give his armies an advantage in battle. Suffice to say, this is a great MP for him. Zhang Jue's craft essence is Yellow Turban, depicting a yellow turban. The link to his character is quite clear. When it came time to begin his rebellion, Zhang Jue's followers wrapped these yellow turbans, or yellow scarves, around their heads, signifying their devotion to the cause. They sought to overthrow the Han dynasty and create a new age of peace, something different from the cesspool of corruption that the Han had become. The CE's text talks about all this, about how Zhang Jue's followers wore these scarves as they marched against the Han, facing their armies in battle, all united in a single movement. While he only had a small core of followers who truly understood what he was after, the Yellow Turban Rebellion gathered a pretty massive force. Perhaps as many as 500,000 rose in revolt in 184 CE. Jumping into the future, Zhang Jue's Valentines CE is stylish deep crimson necktie, depicting said tie rolled up in some kind of pouch. I've never seen one of these before, and perhaps saying that gives away how much of a dummy I am. This seems to connect with Zhang Jue's first ascension, where he dons a more modern suit. It is noted in the CE's text that this tie is actually dyed red, and that it was originally a different color that can be easily guessed, so probably yellow. Honestly, this doesn't really have anything to do with Zhang Jue outside of his fate depiction. Now for characterization, starting with a look into the backstory of Zhang Jue. Zhang Jue was from the Zhulu Commandery, which is located in the southern part of Hebei province today, part of the North China Plain. We have no idea when he was born, only that the main events of his life took place in the latter half of the 2nd century CE, around the same time that the Roman Empire was ruled by Marcus Aurelius, then later his crazy son Commodus. He had 2 younger brothers, Zhang Bao and Zhang Liang, both of whom would follow Zhang Jue in what was to come. After failing the county exam, the test that determined if one was capable enough to be a government official, Zhang Jue wandered his home region, living a meager existence. One day, though, he came across a Taoist sage who granted him a book, the Taiping Ji, or The Essential Art of Great Peace. Dedicating himself to studying the text, Zhang Jue mastered its contents, becoming a Taoist sage capable of formidable magics. He soon built up a following, his 2 younger brothers and a few hundred others, all of whom were taught to perform the spells. His movement became known as the Taiping Dao, or the Way of Peace, and over the course of around 10 years he became famous in northern China. At the very least, a man like this, who seemed to be able to perform miracles, cure the sick, and help those in need, it was something very much desired in these years. The Han Dynasty, which had ruled China for nearly 400 years, was, by now, very much in decline. It had already cracked apart into a major civil war 150 years earlier, reforming and moving the capital to Luoyang in 25 CE. But during the reign of Emperor Ling that began in 168 CE, the empire was rocked by disease and natural disasters. A gang of eunuchs known as the 10 regular attendants engaged in obscene levels of corruption, and the emperor was more interested in food and sex than he was in running the nation. More and more, people began to whisper that the Han Dynasty had lost the mandate of heaven, the right to govern, and that it was only a matter of time before it fell. Zhang Jue saw this as well, and he began preparing his followers to launch an uprising to overthrow the Han. Together with his 2 brothers, they launched the uprising in March of 184 CE, raising a force of perhaps 500,000 in what became known as the Yellow Turban Rebellion. They quickly took control over much of the North China Plain, rampaging across the land. However, despite the Han Dynasty's weakness, it still had sizable armies, and soon forces began to attack the Yellow Turbans. The fighting was pretty even as the Yellow Turbans were able to defeat Han armies on several occasions. A few of those victories are said to be caused by Zhang Jue and his followers' ability to summon storms with their magic. But in October 184 CE, as Zhang Jue's massive rebellion had taken much of northern China and was fighting well against the Han armies, Zhang Jue died of illness. Yes, really. It's quite anticlimactic. His 2 brothers Zhang Bao and Zhang Liang were both killed in December 184, and the Han would dig up Zhang Jue's body and send his head back to Luoyang. With the death of their leaders, the Yellow Turbans lost their momentum, and the Han armies gradually began to mop them up. But this would not be the end. Many of the remaining Yellow Turbans would turn to banditry, and they would plague China for the next 2 decades. Many Han generals got their first real experience of command fighting the Yellow Turbans, and when the empire was plunged into chaos after the death of Emperor Ling in 189 CE, many of these generals would become warlords, seizing power for themselves and fracturing the land into a host of smaller states. Indeed, many of these new warlords, particularly Cao Cao, would capture and recruit Yellow Turbans to serve in their own armies, now fighting for control over the land. Eventually, all of this would lead to the formation of 3 major states who would fight to determine who would be the next ruling dynasty. Wei, Wu, and Shu Han. The 3 Kingdoms era had begun. On a personal note, yes, researching for this video was stupidly easy. I cracked open my copy of the book 3 Kingdoms and was able to read all the parts about Zhang Jue in maybe 15 minutes, probably closer to 10. The book is over 1,700 pages long, 120 chapters. Zhang Jue is introduced on the 2nd page, and then dies in chapter 2. For the record, Lu Bu and Chen Gong die in Chapter 19, the horse Red Hair dies in Chapter 77, Zhao Yun, who was just added in Fate Samurai Remnant, dies in Chapter 97, Zhuge Liang dies in Chapter 104, and Sima Yi dies in Chapter 108. It's a long story, and frankly, it also has massive potential for future Fate servants. I'm shocked we don't have Guan Yu, the guy who would take Red Hair as his horse after the death of Lu Bu and was honestly way more of a badass. And there are tons of other characters I could mention. But anyway, let's get back to Zhang Jue. Moving into Fate Grand Order, we first meet Zhang Jue in the Traum Singularity, where he is serving as an advisor to Kriemhild in the Revenge Realm. From the beginning, he is depicted as a formidable obstacle to anyone seeking to defeat that realm. He possesses a wide array of spells, as well as creating his puppet Yellow Turban soldiers that are stationed throughout Traum to gather information. You meet him early on when the protagonist is captured and taken by the Revenge Realm. He quickly makes himself known as a nice guy when he shows up to torture the protagonist, only being stopped by Salome. His concern about Salome would soon prove to be well-founded, since she, together with servants from the Righteous Realm, would soon help the protagonist escape. Throughout the course of the plot, Zhang Jue is regularly thought to be suspicious, certainly a dangerously intelligent man. There's that scene where someone comes to him with a plot to overthrow Kriemhild, thinking that Zhang Jue would be into that, only for Zhang Jue to kill the guy since he and Kriemhild were already onto him. Now Zhang Jue is actually scheming behind the scenes, he's just much more subtle about it. After all, it turns out that the being that is running the Traum Singularity, Subject E in Area 51, is the true master of Zhang Jue. It is Zhang Jue who was fueling the war in the Traum Singularity, keeping the conflict going in order to sate his master's desire for revenge against proper history. Interestingly, it ended up being a three-way war, much like how the Age of Chaos that Zhang Jue sparked with his rebellion in 184 CE would eventually turn into the Three Kingdoms era. He of course died long before those three kingdoms formed, but it is at least a small nod to his part in history. Since Zhang Jue is considered to be a dangerous man, he's targeted for assassination by Chaldea in the Righteous Realm. Together with Sherlock Holmes, Shu Fu, the protagonist, and an unnamed assassin, you wait until Zhang Jue goes to visit his secret fortress, then attack him there. His fortress is defended using the principles of Qimen Dunjia, an old style of Chinese divination that involves a 3x3 grid full of different symbols, gates, and other aspects which are constantly changing. It's an overcomplicated mess that I'm not even going to try to explain, though I might have to in a later video since it is related to Zhuge Liang's MP unreturning formation. Later on, of course, you learn that the reason this fort is organized in such a way is because Zhang Jue is secretly keeping Siegfried here, insurance in case he really did need to overthrow Kriemhild. But that moment did not arrive. With Shu Fu as part of the team, she and Sherlock solve the puzzle, reach Zhang Jue, and you kill him. Or at least, you kill that copy of him. Another copy of him soon wakes up in the Revenge Realm's capital, though without his prior self's memories. He continues to assist Kriemhild in her war right up until the final battle. During that battle, Zhang Jue is shot by an unknown archer, who we now know as the sniper Sugitani Zenjubo, who tried to assassinate Oda Nobunaga in 1573. This attempt fails and Zenjubo is killed, but this distracts Zhang Jue long enough for Bradamante and Don Quixote to kill Zhang Jue, but again, it's only a copy. You finally meet the real Zhang Jue at the very end of the Singularity when Moriarty takes you to Area 51. Moriarty calls him a Shijie Xian, a corpse-free immortal, continually making new copies of himself. Moriarty then shatters the original Zhang Jue, the second-to-last servant to fall in the Traum Singularity. Now Zhang Jue was obviously not an immortal either in real life or in the story of the Three Kingdoms. But since Xians are immortal or mythical beings closely linked to Taoism, it's not completely crazy to give Zhang Jue this aspect. Overall, when it comes to his character, Zhang Jue is depicted as a competent, dangerous schemer with considerable magical power. But this doesn't really work for me. Zhang Jue was a religious leader who led a massive uprising against the Han, only to die 6 months later from illness. Though he was said to be powerful, charismatic, and intelligent, he wasn't exactly the secretive intriguer that he's depicted as in Traum. Perhaps future appearances will change this, but for now, he doesn't quite seem like Zhang Jue to me. And now for the verdict. What grade would I give Zhang Jue's depiction in Fate Grand Order? Well, his character design and skill set are fantastic. I'm not sure the developers could have done a better job. Yes, the first Ascension and his Valentines CE are a bit silly, but that feels like a nitpick, a tiny blemish on an otherwise perfect design. But characterization is where Zhang Jue stumbles. He should be more like our other rebel servants like Spartacus, Boudica, or the Trung sisters, but with a more religious or philosophical bent. Instead, we get a strategic mastermind engaging in court intrigue and plotting to eventually usurp his leader. The funny thing about this, if you take out the extensive use of Taoist magics, this characterization would actually be a really good matchup for a Three Kingdoms character we already have in FGO, Sima Yi, or Rhaenys. I'll do a full video on her at some point, but the gist is that Sima Yi was a strategic wizard who held off Zhuge Liang, but who also gradually usurped power away from a Cao dynasty that he served. His sons Sima Shi and Sima Zhao would continue this, and Sima Zhao's son Sima Yan, Sima Yi's grandson, would overthrow Cao Huan and found the Jin dynasty, becoming the ultimate victor of the Three Kingdoms era. But we don't get that sort of character in FGO Sima Yi, instead getting it in Zhang Jue, who it really doesn't fit. It's a damn shame too, because like with Blackbeard, Lancelot, and Siegfried, Zhang Jue's skill set is superb. If the developers had gotten his characterization right, Zhang Jue might have been the first servant to get an A+, but alas, his depiction lets him down. And so for a final grade, I am going to give Zhang Jue, the leader of the Yellow Turban Rebellion, a D+. If you would like to learn more about another servant who led a revolt against the Han Dynasty, check out my video on the Trung sisters here. Until next time.